Hello, good morning, and welcome to the third instalment of Driven by Debate. So these events are being brought to you by the paid media team here at Journey Further. We're aiming to discuss and debate the most important topics in what is a very fast-paced industry. Today, it's a personal favourite of mine, which is Google Shopping. Particularly, we're going to be discussing around the newer black box cross-channel smart shopping products and how this is stacking up versus, say, standard shopping campaigns with smart bidding. What makes it an interesting topic today is that there's still a lot of opinion around it, and obviously it's a very, very controversial product, is smart shopping. Obviously, it does mean that there's going to be different solutions for different businesses. There's going to be different opinions around things. So, yeah, that's my quick disclaimer before somebody's opinion gets us into any bother. To talk through this today, we're going to be joined by three of our best analysts here, as well as some guy called Chris Rowett. So my name's Steve. I'm the host today, and joining me, we've got Sandra, Matt, John, and Chris. So say hello, guys. Almost got everybody on. Hello.
Hello.
Cool. So the way that this is going to work is hopefully you guys are going to argue against each other as you've all got different opinions, and hopefully we'll get some decent insight out the back of it. But, I'll kick things off with just a pretty simple statement question. I'm going to go to Matt first. I know Matt is a very big fan of smart shopping, big fan of PPC in general, I think, as well. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Matt, why do you think smart shopping is something that clients should be, getting excited about and embracing?
I think it's just the extra reach that it can give you. I mean, ultimately, we all know what shopping is. You upload a feed based on your product information. Google interprets all of that information and then matches products to search queries to try and get you as much visibility as possible. But it's limited in itself by the actual search volume that's driven across the search network. And smart shopping, fundamentally, it works cross-channel, it works cross-format, and it means that there's the opportunity to kind of branch your activity out beyond just the Google or the Microsoft search engine results page. And it means that you can generate a lot of reach, a lot of visibility, and in pretty much every instance of my kind of personal experience working with smart shopping, extra revenue as well. And ultimately, we're KPI based on revenue, based on potentially margin, and smart shopping, in my experience, has been a really great way of kind of maximizing the return we can get through the additional formats.
So cool. So it's controversial, right? Because it really limits what data you can see. Some might say that's maybe your data and you should be able to access it. So, on the flip side of it, why is it so controversial, Chris? What's wrong with it? Why are we talking about it?
I mean, so I'm an old school PPC, and I always thought the value in the channel tended to be that it's not just about driving revenue or whatever your goal is. It's also about gathering insights that can be used on other channels. And it seems like this sort of new breed of smart shopping takes us just another step further to the point where all you get from Google is you tell them what your target is and what your products are, and they go do the rest. So for me, being able to tell clients things like what keywords are actually triggering your sales, and which products you should put in front of which keywords. If it's a generic keyword, actually you should try this product because it's your most sort of important one. It's the one that really attracts attention versus more niche things. So being able to get those insights out of what is a very open channel and relay them to my client in order to help them with other channels or generally with running their business is always been a key part of running a paid media campaign. And I think this solution here, I'm not 100% convinced that removing that insight from the user is necessarily in our interest.
So it's not just search queries, though, is it? It's Matt sort of said about the reach that you get and the networks that smart shopping's open. So what do you think about the fact that you can't see where it's spending your money? You know, whether it's on search networks or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, to start with, the slightly cynical side of me worries that Google find a very clever way to sort of take your what marketing spend you would spend on shopping, and if it can achieve your target in less than that marketing spend, then it can extend that reach by simply spending your money on prospecting and so on and so forth, which may not give you the returns that you would want. And if this was not a situation where it was a black box, you'd be left as a business with the choice of saying, well, I've spent 80% of my budget and I've hit my target. What should I do with that 20%? And normally you'd then consider other channels. You'd say, actually, I could do with more spend in paid social maybe. Whereas Google's taking it out of your hand and saying, well, if there's any left over, I'm going to pummel that into some prospecting or branding activity without you really giving the say so, given that your target's a revenue-based one. So that's the cynical side. I'm not 100% convinced it definitely does that. But I don't like the fact that you don't get to really analyze exactly where your ads are being placed and for what audience exactly it's using to generate reach. That seems to go away from me from the idea of talking to clients, understanding their business objectives, and trying to translate that into a coherent plan online. This is now just give me a revenue target and away I'll go and do whatever I need to do to get it.
Yeah. So has anybody got any thoughts on that? John, you've usually got something to say.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, so it's a really interesting point that Chris raises on the value of an analyst and what they kind of bring to the table with regards to the day-to-day management of PPC account. And I think, yeah, the key point that you touch upon there is insight. So, you know, what can an analyst bring to the table that potentially a machine can't? And you know, whether that's business insight or product insight or behavioral insight that might be related to all three of those things. But my counterpoint to that would be what you're basically saying is that you're pitting your own ability against that of Google's AI machine learning. And I think so. I was working with a paid social analyst yesterday, and he said something really interesting that, you know, he doesn't back himself against the thousands of millions of data points that Google has manually optimizing ad copy. I think there will be a point where insight will actually, we'll have to take a sidestep away from that and just guide AI and machine learning to basically deliver insight that we couldn't possibly calculate by ourselves. I mean, yeah, there'll be obvious stuff that will be human-led that a machine might miss, but I think generally speaking, you're basically saying that you can do better than machine learning as a human. And in the long run, I would really question that as an optimization strategy. Yeah.
One thing I think insight does give, and one thing I think everybody's got a duty to do for their clients is you've got to be able to provide a sort of definite answer as to whether like one product works better than another. So say you've had a retail account that's been spending on smart shopping for the last on standard shopping for the last 10 years. They've adopted smart bidding on standard shopping, and that's gone really well. Putting that onto smart shopping, I think, you know, if you've already got an established account, you're going to have to say that actually this is definitely performing better in order to make that switch, because it seems like an irreversible switch once it's been made. I know, Sandra, you've kind of, I don't know, there's a lot of difficulties in testing it because obviously it kind of supersedes standard shopping and all that sort of stuff. So what are you doing on your clients in order to get them that insight so they can make such a big decision?
Yeah, so we've currently been testing smart shopping on one of our kind of largest retail clients, and it has been interesting so far. I think we've kind of touched on some of the limitations, and I think even testing, like you kind of said, is a limitation in itself from a smart shopping perspective. It is difficult to test in that you can't just set up like a 50-50 experiment like you can on like your non-brand search or whatever. Because smart shopping basically will supersede standard shopping. So you can't run them both at the same time. So the way we've done it is by focusing on a specific category and keeping the other categories basically as a control. So it's not perfect. Obviously, there's going to be outside influences that can have a massive impact on your daily and weekly trends and stuff like that. That's definitely something that we're conscious of. But yeah, we're now actually testing on 2 categories. So we chose the first one, just basically looking for a category that was quite stable, high volume, and we did see quite positive results. So we decided to add in another test on a different category, just to obviously get another gauge of if we see kind of similar kind of trends or results.
Yeah, shopping's dead difficult to test stuff on at the best of times. Like, you can't do campaigns and experiments on it, which is a massive pain in the bum sometimes, because you've kind of got to run tests at different periods of time, which introduce seasonality and you know, all that sort of stuff. How's that test going for you, Sandra, given that it's not a perfect setup? Like, can you maybe sort of, have you got any insight as to why, you know, performance might have changed or why it's performing well?
Yeah, so we have kind of seen positive results so far in both of the categories. So, you know, there have been some fluctuations in trends. Obviously, things like the Easter long weekend and like stores reopening has obviously been a massive one in the last week or so. But there are definitely signs that smart shopping is having a positive effect on the categories we're running on versus the existing ones. So one of the signs which I thought was quite interesting was the increase in click share that we've seen. So in both categories, we pushed them live at completely different times, but in both cases, we saw quite a sharp uptick in click share that directly correlates to when smart shopping was switched on. So I think that's a really interesting point, because I think obviously one of the major benefits of smart shopping is that it's using all of Google's vast data and signals, and essentially it seems like smart shopping is proving to be better at placing us into the more relevant auctions, which is gaining us a greater share of relevant traffic. So yeah, on the whole, I think it's been positive, but I think it's definitely something we're going to keep testing. Like you said, it's a massive decision that will impact the account.
Yeah. So yeah, testing I see as the biggest problem with it. Forget like removing the search queries and stuff like that. I could maybe live with that. It's just kind of when you make a decision to move on to smart shopping, it's, you know, I don't think there's much going back on it unless you want to continually test it, which might obviously limit you from doing other bits of work. Anybody else managed to test it successfully and, you know, got some results? What ways are there to do it? I mean, I'll just pick you, John, because I know you have.
I was just and I'll just have to apologise in advance because someone's trying to knock through my wall by the sounds of it. So if that does happen, I'll mute myself, and I'll try and be succinct. So it's exactly the same way as Sandra tested. So month on month, we had 2 categories. For example, towels and bedding. In the first month, we ran both of them on a regular shopping structure. And then the second month, we ran towels in smart shopping and bedding in the regular shopping structure. So effectively, bedding was the control month on month. And then we saw the uplift in revenue from one month to the other. Now, if it was purely seasonal, you'd expect both categories to have an uplift month on month. And actually, the smart shopping uplift outperformed the bedding uplift. So you can say that whilst there was seasonality month on month, it was the percentage uplift was greater in smart shopping than it was in bedding. So for me, that was about as robust a test as you can get. Like you say, how do you replicate that once you've made a decision to go on smart shopping? How do you go back on it? That's the question. But I think that initial test was enough for myself and the client to give it the green light and see the positives.
And John, I mean, how much of a percentage do you think you need to see in order for it to be worth maintaining? Because if this was a 1% increase in revenue and it was proven, okay, you've definitely got 1% better revenue return from Google Shopping specifically, but you're losing all that insight. I would argue that insight is worth more than 1% to my other channels. For instance, being able to take the search query data and use it to build a better search campaign, because shopping provides such good insight into search query data, or taking the insights you're learning from products and transport that over to paid social or even other channels. I would argue that potentially I could increase a client's revenue by more than 1% overall from that data that I've just lost, because you want to drive 1% more revenue within Google Shopping. So that would be the question would be, how much of an uplift would you need to sacrifice that extra insight?
Yeah, it's a really interesting point. I think it was pretty clear on the client I'm talking about. Off the top of my head, I believe it was a 35% increase month on month, and that was with like statistical significance. That was enough for it just to be a blanket. yeah, go ahead, because this is obviously considerably better. But yeah, it would have to vary client by client, because I think there'll be some industries where search term insight can actually be more useful than just performance, like you say. I think the more competitive the market, the more insight you can get, the better. I think it also depends as well on KPIs and how mature a business is, how growth versus efficiency is a KPI. They'll all be considered. But when you're purely tasked on growing and growing revenue, when you see performance like that, in that particular instance, it was a bit of a no-brainer.
We've had our first question, which is good. I'm not going to ask it now, but I'm going to ask at the end of the show. But it's worth mentioning for anybody watching, if you do have questions as we go, just to whack them into the comments. And obviously, we can ask the guys if you want to ask a particular one of them as well. Obviously, just remember to mention them. So yeah, moving on a little bit. There's obviously this issue with visibility. This issue with, I don't know, like, it seems like people might be standoffish of the product because it is so black box. We're not exactly sure where money's been spent, or we can't maybe take as much insight from smart shopping as we used to be able to from standard shopping. But we must be able to do something, right, to sort of like get the most out of it. So there must be a best practice, say, for your smart shopping campaign, same as we probably have a best practice for shopping campaigns. So in the past with shopping campaigns, I've always split kind of like brand and non-brand queries out for the use of reporting, and the fact that you can't influence brand performance as easily as you can on non-brands. So but Matt, I know when people kind of set up smart shopping, do they see it, do you think, as something where you just whack all products into one ad group and just leave it, or can you do more than that?
Yeah, I think there's a massive misconception with smart shopping. You've hit the nail on the head there. I think a lot of people believe that you create a catch-all campaign, one ad group, one product tagged in, you add some very generic brand imagery, some very generic brand messaging, and you basically just sit back and relax. And that in all honesty couldn't be further from the truth. Smart shopping, from a fundamental element, is very similar for how you can approach it and how you should be approaching it. So there are tons of different ways you can break the structures down. It can be by product type, product category, division, department. It can be by margin band. It can be by price type. It can be by demand category. So whether it's a bestseller, whether it's maybe a high risk line that you really need to push, there is the opportunity to have a lot of granularity in the structure. And be able to kind of meet the targets you've been set by your client and the objectives that you've got on a case by case basis. The one kind of caveat I would say, and Google are very vocal when it comes to SKU count, is smart shopping does work better with the more data you can provide it. Obviously, it's a fully automated black box solution, as we've already been through. So the more information you can feed into that campaign, naturally, the better that's going to be. So realistically, I don't think there's a specific number for like a minimum amount of SKUs you would want per campaign, but you need to make sure you're driving a reasonable amount of volume per campaign to really be maximizing the kind of intent and opportunity from it. But yeah, as you kind of mentioned at the start, there's a big misconception, and smart shopping is very much an ad format you can be granular with, and if you do deploy it across your account, it's an area that you really should be looking to really kind of get into the details of to really maximize performance. Yeah,
so structure's obviously, I don't know, number one thing, right, in PPC, in search and shopping usually. I wonder if it's still possible to get things like brand and non-brand splits. I don't know, Sandra, can you think of, I think maybe you've maybe thought of a few ways we can get around this and maybe have a mixture of insight and the sort of benefits of the power of smart shopping?
Yeah, definitely. I think as well, just something to consider, like with standard shopping, like obviously priority settings have been like a massive part of the structure of, the existing kind of shopping setup. But I think something we've noticed with that as well is that seems to be changing a bit, and they're no longer like as perfect or as good as they were. We've definitely seen across a few clients, like in the last few months, that more and more we're seeing the priorities aren't working as well, and we're starting to see like more non-brand keywords trickling into brand campaigns and stuff like that. So I think that's maybe another indication of like the fact that even standard shopping might be changing a little bit, and that's something to consider if the fully automated approach is more towards where Google's heading. But in terms of like brand and non-brand in smart shopping, I think there are potential ways to go about it. I know we've done it on another client where we're running, basically we've got brand set up in a standard shopping campaign and generics run via smart shopping, because Google have actually come in and added the brand keywords as negatives in the generic stuff. So yeah, I think there is kind of that potential to work with Google on stuff like that as well, to kind of help segment that a little bit more as well.
So that's kind of like an alternative to priorities, because effectively, smart shopping should supersede standard shopping. So all of the generic keywords should go through that. That's an interesting way of setting it up. So once it's set up, management wise, it reminds me a lot of like smart bidding coming on, and obviously like it took a while to get adopted on smart bidding, but I think now, if you're not on smart bidding, then it's probably a big flag on an account. So when should is now the time to adopt it, do you think, Chris? And will it change how we manage shopping going forward if we do think that it's the right thing to be doing?
So for me, I'm always a fan of sort of this curve of when you should adopt, and not necessarily being so far ahead of the curve that you adopt everything before anyone else, before the products have had a chance to mature, to iron out any kinks, to sort of fully understand what you're getting yourself into. But I think we are getting to the point now where smart shopping has been around for a while. We've certainly talked to our Google reps and realized there've been initial problems with the machine that such as not being able to add negative keywords that they've now fixed. So I think we're getting to that point where we're on the curve of you should adopt in the near future in order to make sure you're getting the benefits from smart shopping. You're learning before they take away the option to not do it, and you can sort of skill your team up. So I think we're at the right point now for adoption. Yeah,
and what does it mean if we're going to have sort of smart shopping as a standard thing? Does it mean, I don't know, maybe Matt, you've got a lot of experience in managing these campaigns. Like, what's different about managing the smart shopping campaign compared to managing a standard shopping campaign? I think back to smart bidding when that came in, we had a lot of issues with maybe performance dipping down, or like there was always a lot of concern from clients. It's like, oh God, we've had a bad week, but spend hasn't come down enough, compared to when we used to manually run things and say like, we'd maybe have more consistent ROI every week. Smart bidding was like a bit of a problem for a while. It seems like it's maybe got better than that. But how's smart shopping stacking up in that respect? Is it difficult to hit your KPIs, or is it just as easy?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. I think the role we have as analysts whilst using smart shopping is fundamentally different. I know from speaking with John, he's got quite a good point around feeds that I'll let him run through after this. But from kind of a day-to-day point of view, the one thing I've found with smart shopping, which I think we've seen across a lot of clients, is the budget amount that you set is extremely important to the value you're driving. So with smart shopping, essentially using maximize conversion value as the default bidding portfolio, your budget amount on a daily level is very important to kind of train Google to understand how much volume it can actually drive. Obviously, you can add the target ROAS overlay to that maximize conversion value to basically tell Google we want as much revenue as we can within the ROAS thresholds that we've set. But that's probably the one area that I would say is a very fundamental part of smart shopping, and it's something I optimize on a daily level. So when I come in and do my daily performance checks Monday to Friday, the first thing I look at is what did we spend yesterday on shopping? What does the performance look like? Were there any kind of outside seasonal factors that I need to take into consideration? But ultimately, are the existing budgets that I have on my shopping structure still relevant, and do I need to change them? So I think that's one area that I would say. Obviously, the lack of insight in some areas from a search query perspective, longer term, has an impact. most accounts you'll do a search query report, once every couple of weeks, once a month, once a quarter, depending on what the volume looks like. Naturally, that's something you can't do with smart shopping. So there are things that detract from kind of a BAU shopping structure. But John, I'm not sure if you want to touch on that point around feeds and how our roles kind of changed with smart shopping.
Yeah. So I think those points you touched on about managing the campaigns are kind of a more traditional way. So in interface, looking at bids, target ROAS, looking at daily budgets, looking at targeting. I think that's becoming still important, but it's just becoming a smaller percentage of the overall, with actually feed management becoming the biggest piece of the pie when actually looking at how to manage shopping campaigns. Simply because the information in the feed is what's ultimately driving the algorithms and the AI to show the right products against the right queries. And I suppose what it means is that you kind of become almost more of an SEO in a way, of like optimizing titles, optimizing descriptions. Is there any particular keywords included in a title that makes it particularly resonating with a particular search query? Is there a particular product that needs a certain number of keywords or a certain type of description to make it show more often or less often? Order of products. So is it actually the color that needs to go first, or is it the size if it's fashion, or is it the brand if it's for a department store? So all these kind of things become a much bigger focus, and I think every PPCO could probably say that they've been guilty of in the past neglecting the feed and just doing all their optimizations in interface and getting good results. But actually, I think now that those options in interface are becoming more of a black box, as we discussed, we just need to focus on what we can control. And obviously, the feed, you can control it from start to finish, what goes into the Google Shopping feed. So,
challenge for you there, John. Sorry to interrupt you, but is search queries not the most important part of managing a feed and putting titles in? Do you not need to have that data to tell you what search queries work for your account? So if you think about, I know one of your clients years ago, you put the word luxury into the titles, and it absolutely massively increased your conversion rate because you'd show on more of the relevant auctions. Like now you've got smart shopping on there, you don't know what what's happening. So are you just relying on old data or search, non-brand search data? What's the best you can do for it?
Yeah, I mean, you'll always be limited to what you can physically get your hands on, and as that becomes less and less, you're just going to have to move into a more intuition-based marketing. I think there'll still be ways that you can test, as we described, week on week. So in a non-seasonal period, I'll include the word luxury in front of all my products for 1 week, and then the following week I'll take it out, and maybe I'll have a little control in there as well. And then over the course of 2 weeks, I'll have a look and see what that impact is in clicks. I think, yeah, it's clunky, and you're right, you might not be able to have a baseline to start formulating ideas. But I think going back to sound marketing principles about a brand, if it's a luxury brand, if it's a travel brand, there'll be core ideas that you don't necessarily need search query data to implement this kind of testing. But it is a good point.
Yeah. So it brings me on to probably my final thing I want to put forward to you, which is like, why are Google making things why are they changing it for us? Why aren't we allowed that data anymore? Why is more and more of PPC becoming sort of black box solutions? So I don't know, maybe Chris, can you offer up any thoughts about why this is happening and where the future might lie with regards to it?
Yeah, I've always thought that actually what Google are doing is they're raising the overall level of PPC management across all accounts. And so what we find is that actually, if you feel like you're a really high quality, skilled, experienced PPC analyst, Google aren't really doing these things for your benefit. You're the sort of 1% of spend that might actually come down as a result of this. Google may actually impact on your ability to do your job, and therefore you can't drive as much revenue, and your client spends very slightly less. But the 99% of other accounts out there that aren't managed by someone, that are maybe like small businesses that spend a small amount of money, where the ability for them to be able to just say, look, I just sell this service, can you just do the rest for me, will bring them onto the map and actually get them spending 10 times as much as they would without any access to any experience. So I think a lot of these changes are designed to go towards the wider long tail market, and less so the specific client base that an agency would work with, or that would have an in-house team. So I think, yeah, it's a bit frustrating for people who really want to get into the detail of it and really optimize it to fine details. But I think Google are designing this for the mass of accounts that could be out there and potential new business that could come in.
Yeah. Cool. I'm gonna put you all like hugely on the spot, because I know we haven't discussed this, but like I'd like a final statement probably before we move on to questions. So if each of you are able to give just like a little summary of your thoughts on this very controversial product, like what you think the best thing to do with it is, and then we'll move on to questions. So I'm going to pick you out. Let's start with Matt. If you want to just sum up your thoughts and how you approach it. Yeah,
I mean, I don't suppose this will come across as a surprise to the people tuning in based on kind of what I've already covered, but I'm massively pro smart shopping. I think on the accounts I've worked on, it's added a lot of value. I know it's tricky to quantify value when you've kind of had 12 months of a global pandemic and you don't really know what the true baseline performance would look like. I think there are a lot of cons with it, and certainly when this product was first introduced, 18, 24 months ago, whenever it was, I think the cons massively outweighed the pros at that point. I think over time, as the product itself has evolved, it's improved a hell of a lot, and it's added a lot of value. And search queries are always going to be an issue, but based on the testing that we've run as an agency, so just using that example that John mentioned around 35% extra revenue, I'd be quite confident in saying if you sat down 100 CEOs, financial directors, marketing directors, and asked them the question, do you want 35% more revenue, or do you want visibility and granularity on everything? I'd probably say 98, 99 of them would say, I want the revenue. So for me, a lot of value, and I think if you aren't currently testing it, you definitely should be.
Very insightful. Sandra, what are your thoughts on it as a whole?
I think for me, I'm still probably a bit on the fence. Like, I think I'm still in like the relatively early stages of testing it. And I think, for me, the main thing is just going to be around testing. And like, it's obviously going to be case by case on different clients. It's potentially going to like result in quite different results. So I think for me, it's just continue to test and learn. And I think there are cases as well, like if we had a brand new client and, we wanted to launch shopping, I don't think personally I'd just switch smart shopping on straight away. Like, I think you kind of need a baseline of performance and get some of that insight from the search queries and stuff like that first. And then again, just like test it. So I think for me, it's about testing it and continuing to learn.
Cool. A bit more cautious than the gung-ho Matt Morris. But John, do you want to back Matt up then? Or, have you got something else? Another opinion?
No, I think I actually back Sandra on this. I wouldn't. I think whilst I've seen some really good results, I wouldn't see smart shopping as the default. I would see it as taking someone on a journey towards it through testing, because it might just be different for different industries. But fundamentally, I think my end goal would be to have a client on smart shopping. Even if it wasn't straight away, I would want to put in a strategy that over the course of a few months would get them towards it. Simply because I just want to ask myself the question, like, do I think I can do a better job than a machine learning algorithm made by the biggest data corporation on the planet? And I really don't think I can in the long run. So that's a question I always ask myself with Google products. And I think if it's backed up by real world performance, I'm going to back the smart solution.
Just quickly though, we're not pitting manual against it, are we? We're pitting other smart solutions against it, probably. So, is there not something to be said that they're just as good? Especially seeing as we can't accurately quantify, A/B results, or whatever?
Well, we don't know, do we? I suppose it's how fundamentally different is smart shopping to regular shopping on smart bidding. For me, the performance has said they are different, but yeah, you're right. We just don't know.
Yeah. So, Chris, end the confusion and give us a final statement as to what people should do regarding this sort of problem, this new product.
Yeah, I think don't be scared of it. Obviously, it's a big step in the direction of changing our roles, which is a scary thought. But I think it forces us to learn new skills. I think that the plan for our team and probably for the rest of the industry is to start looking to become more involved with our clients' businesses, to really understand their objectives and to help them navigate sort of these products. So less of the sort of the manual changes that you still get with a smart bidding solution. Smart shopping, it takes it to the next level where you don't need to do half of those processes, but you do really need to understand your client's business. So I think it changes what we should focus on as analysts, but ultimately it gives better performance. I think we're seeing that already, and we'll continue to see that get better and better. So I think it's good for channel performance, and we will inevitably need to change our role and find new ways to gather those insights that we've had before. I see a potential resurgence in competitor tools and insight-based tools that can come onto the market to help us gather those insights that Google have been freely giving us until this point.
Cool. Thank you very much. So about 7 or 8 minutes left to rattle through some questions. There has been some questions, which is great, because I think that's the last time we did this, we got no questions. So thanks for adding that, guys. It shows like a level of engagement that obviously we're sort of after. So first question, I think hopefully has been covered, but I might just invite one of you to kind of sum it up. Is that Travis has asked, has smart shopping had a positive ROI? So yeah, if anybody, I know obviously we've sort of said about the difficulties of testing it, but who wants to sort of take that?
Yeah, I can just cover this one. So I guess just to kind of take a bit of a backward step, when you set the campaign up, it will always, as default, set you on to maximize conversion value bidding, which means that you need to change your daily budget to make sure you are aligning the value or the revenue that you're driving from that campaign proportional to your spend to then hit the ROAS that you want. But then there is also the option to add a target ROAS overlay to that maximized conversion value. And then those two separate bidding portfolios, in essence, work together to drive the value you have asked for specifically. So I guess the really short answer to your question is 100% yes, it does drive profit. It does drive a very strong ROAS, providing you're managing it in a coherent way, kind of using the targets and the structure together collectively to maximize the return that you're getting. So yes, it does drive a positive return on investment.
Cool. Thank you very much. Hopefully that's that one out. I'm going to take the next question because I think I'm probably the most experienced with it. So Gareth has asked, what are your thoughts on companies like Bidnamic? Bidnamic.com, just to let you know, are a Leeds-based tech shopping management agency. And we have partnered with them. I particularly have partnered with them for a number of years on accounts. And, I know the guys over there are great, Ingvar and Liam, like really fantastic bit of software, achieved some unbelievably good results over the years. So, yeah, I mean, what I would say is that, if you're running campaigns through their third-party tech, it's still worth testing as much as you can, as much to see, sort of like how performance fluctuates, because the idea that you've got to really put forward to your clients is whether or not this third-party tech or Google's black box solution is going to deliver the best results. And, you've kind of got a duty to your role as an analyst is to answer that business question for your client, and let your client make a decision on how they want to proceed, giving them all the sort of scope of the argument. So, yeah, I mean, overall, really positive sort of experience with Bidnamic. But, as with any sort of solution that you put on any account, your role is to test and learn and to, adopt the best practices for your client after getting their opinion on it. So hopefully that clears it up. So Robbie asks, trust is a big thing with smart shopping, trusting that Google are actually implementing the negative keywords that we send them to add. With a view of search term data, are these negatives definitely being added? Well, yeah. Although performance is good generally, it almost definitely could be better with search term visibility to refine the campaigns further. Just add to that, why are they removing the search queries? Is it anything to do with the fact that it's showing on display network and all that sort of stuff? Is it, maybe there's a problem with that? So does anybody want to venture in on Robbie's question?
Yeah, I mean, I feel that there's a reason why they're removing the search queries. It's probably something Google's wanted to do for a long time, and with shopping products, it's been an option to do that. Whereas with search, I think the outcry will be too much to take that away. Again, I think it goes back to the point that a lot of people businesses that don't have expertise or don't have the time to manage this probably wouldn't know what to do with those search queries. And I think Google are probably scared that people will make manual decisions on terms that the machine wouldn't make. You see vanity terms and certain keywords that people think are so important to them, but actually the ROAS reality is they're not that important. You don't need to compete so heavily on this one. My counter to that would be that a lot of businesses I work with actually would be thinking less about the ROI return on every keyword and more about how they can compete with their closest rivals. I know some of them really know their competitors very well. And if it came into a situation where they were able to sacrifice a bit of ROAS on a keyword to make sure they kept the pressure up, to make sure they were, appearing in the top slots for that term next to their competitor and therefore driving the bid prices up, they probably would do that on the basis that it's not just about your own ROAS. This is not a game where you're the only person playing. If your rival does really well through a sale or through their keyword set, then actually that gives them more funding and more ability to increase their investment into shopping. So part of the game is to really understand what your competitors are doing and stop them getting the upper hand, stop them realizing the value in things, and make it more expensive for them. So it's a balancing act. And I think with the smart products, we're going to lose that aspect, especially if they don't give us the search term visibility. So it would be nice to have it, obviously.
It was.
There's just one thing I'd like to add for this point as well that Robbie's asked. Yeah. So just in terms of that structure that you've built, Sandra, that you referred to 10-15 minutes ago around how you've got your smart shopping campaign built for your non-brand queries and then obviously the display element, and then you've built a conventional BAU shopping structure for your brand queries as well. You've asked Google to add the brand negative keywords to the smart shopping campaign to allow the traffic to flow between the two based on brand or non-brand. If Google hadn't applied the keywords, the negative keywords that had been requested, that structure wouldn't work. So I think based on that test and that test alone, obviously we'd kind of need more data to prove that they actually are doing it longer term across a broader depth of clients. But in that one particular example that Sandra mentioned, we have evidence to say that Google are actioning it. And as much as we kind of don't like the fact search queries are gone, and obviously it's not a good thing, we can have a degree of trust in Google that when we ask them to make these changes on our behalf, it does appear they are doing them. Yeah,
they did not want us to set up that structure, but we did it anyway. They said that you'd be better off having a smart shopping campaign that's sort of a low priority or whatever, a negative for just your brand stuff. But yeah, I think we basically said that we need to keep brand on the standard shopping. Because generally with brand shopping, you want to be hitting sort of those high impression shares. And obviously it just helps us sense check stuff. So you could potentially do the same thing, Robbie, with your campaigns, just with whatever negatives you're adding in. If you then start seeing them, if you just have like a small test campaign underneath it, standard shopping, if you start seeing those queries popping up in that standard one, then they're not getting captured by the smart one, which sort of conclusively says about, what Matt says, they've been correctly added and we can trust that Google has done it. So, way to do it. It's a bit of a way around the houses, I suppose, but yeah. Cool. Got a few more. They're coming in thick and fast. So, Hannah says, thinking about the loss we have in reporting and insights, you think it's the case that we will start shifting what we report on and the insights that we provide? So, for example, giving insights based on product performance in GA over search query data from Google Ads. Who's having that?
Yeah, it makes sense. Because obviously it is a product-based campaign, so reporting on product kind of brings it more back into the realms of a real-life business. If someone's a shop, they don't care what the customers come in and asked for. They usually care what the customer has actually bought. And I think, looking at reporting on product performance could be an easy way to sidestep the need for query data. I suppose query data is important because you never know. There might just be stuff in the smart shop campaigns that is effectively a waste of budget. But I think, touching on Chris's point, I wonder to what extent as well can attribution models play a part in it as well. Because if it's on a last click basis, there might be queries in there that just never work. But who knows, maybe there's some kind of AI, some kind of algorithm saying that actually you are worthwhile bidding on this because in 5 days time or a few clicks down the line, this is a journey starter. If you're just manually optimizing to queries yourself on a last click basis, you might be cutting out stuff that's useful in the long run. So yeah, but definitely moving to product performance could be a nice sidestep for sure.
Cool. I'm going to have to move on to the next question now. It's a question particularly for Matt, which is nice. You've got a fan there, Matt. So Travis has asked, do you think that this will benefit larger corporations with bigger campaign budgets rather than more niche brands with smaller budgets?
That's a good question. It's not one, unfortunately, I can kind of give you a yes, no answer to. I can give you some context. So Google do kind of quote, and they have always said, the more information you can feed into a smart shopping campaign, the better it will perform. And naturally, more data comes typically with higher spend levels. Certainly in the examples for the clients I've used smart shopping on, they all have kind of been, I think the lowest budget, we're probably talking maybe about 2,500 a week in terms of spend. So it does tend to prioritize the kind of medium to higher volume accounts in my experience. But I think that the main thing we can kind of take away from it is you just need to test it. I don't think there's a way that we can accurately say it will or will not add value to a potentially a smaller business. And I think it would probably be a little bit naive to say that, you know, smart shopping is kind of a feature that will only benefit the larger corporations anyway. I think it's the T word. It's about testing and it's about understanding what that performance looks like and ultimately seeing which drives the most amount of value for each business on a case-by-case basis.
Very political. I like it. Cool. Final question. So if you've got any more, make sure you get them in now. Ed, our very own Ed, has asked, what are your thoughts on businesses who have very few products or even single product websites? I know we've got a couple of clients that are like that. So can they still benefit from smart shopping? Does anybody know, from their own experience if that's the case? Or, can you at least maybe theorize, whether it would be a benefit?
I mean, I cannot personally see why they wouldn't. I think, you could be talking about a product here that has 1,000 different ways of searching for it. And shopping is a huge priority for how this thing sells. I'd say that potentially, and it's very vague in terms of what this might mean, but potentially this would work better on fewer product areas than smart shopping would work on a company that has, 1,000 different products, each of which only sells one per year. I think that's where we've seen some struggles in the past, where the portfolio of service or product is so spread out that you only expect one sale per product per year, and the smart bidding simply can't deal with that in terms of there isn't enough data to back up any one signal. And that's where sometimes actually a more sensible common sense approach from an analyst would do better than smart bidding would, because you've got to look at the products and go, well, is it worth bidding on this? So I think it potentially does work quite well on few products, single service aspects.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to ask one question from me. I'm going to ask it to you, Chris. What's the next evolution of it? And, what's the next evolution of our roles? Are we in danger potentially as analysts if more and more of these products come in and, you know, potentially becomes a self-managed service, whereas, you know, obviously before it was a lot more hands-on. So where do you think the future lies for us? Should I be looking at other careers?
Absolutely.
You know?
Yeah, I think a change in our role is definitely coming, and it's coming more soon than we probably expected when we were looking at this 2 or 3 years ago. We're already starting to gear ourselves up for the idea that we should know the products inside and out. We should know how to set them up. We should know how to troubleshoot them, how to give them access to the data they need. So I certainly find myself and you guys in the team doing more work with clients to sort of cleanse their internal data and feed it into the system in order to give better results. We do more work with clients on understanding business objectives and translating it into something that more closely matches what they're trying to do. You know, it used to be back in the day, I just want to get sales. It's like, well, yeah, but what about different values of sale? What about the margins on those sales? What about kind of stock levels and what you're trying to achieve? So more of our role will go that way. And less of our role will be the actual implementation. The next evolution from Google I see being, you know, heading towards the point where you no longer have any control within the system. You just say, here's my product. I want to appear on search and shopping, or even not even that, just here's my product, go Google, sell it. And that's a scary thought, but you know, you'd have very limited input there. It'd be a case of, what is the data you have to add to this? What is the target you're trying to achieve? What are the products or services you sell? Away you go. And obviously that massively changes our role, but I see that coming at some point down the line. And the big scary area is in sort of the creative world. We have to become better at creative, because the thing that may end up distinguishing between one brand and another is how well they represent their product or their service, how well they attract attention to it in order to win in this auction. Because the smart bidding will set appropriate bids, it'll set an appropriate strategy. But if you can improve the kind of consumer view of your product, the creative that goes with it, then potentially you win in that system, and the smart bidding starts to push you up.
Cool. So that, I think, is all about we've got time for. You know, basically, thanks to all you guys for coming on and speaking. Thanks for everybody that tuned in, and you know, especially if you asked a question, thank you very much for engaging with this. We will most likely be doing more of these, so keep an eye out on the Journey Further LinkedIn page for more events. Get signed up to them, and yeah, hopefully everybody's learned a little bit and can take something away that they can go and use. So yeah, thank you very much. Have a lovely afternoon.